Hi there, students. Professor Laney here with Chapter 5. So now we're going to get into it. The foundation chapters up to now really just gave us a bottom line or a similar foundation for every single student from here on out. So now we're going to really talk about each type of impairment. Again, chapters 5 all the way through chapters 15. We're going to talk about specific type of impairments, and everything we've learned so far applies to these specific impairments. So again, the class is not exactly cumulative, but it's not exactly not cumulative. So again, once you learn your ABCs, how do you stop learning them in order to make words? We've learned our ABCs. We are now going to apply them into the rest of the chapter. So let's get to it. I apologize that this is in two parts because it is rather large. Now, I've said that with every chapter so far, but this one was extremely large. This was about 200 slides. So I tried to split it up a little bit. The first part is really just the intro in the first section, so we can define what language and speech impairments are and really get into the differences here. So again, let's make sure that we understand that this specific chapter is talking about, again, we already passed Unit 1. We're in Unit 2, and we're talking about speech and language impairments, not learning a new language. We already talked about English language learners or culturally and linguistically diverse. This is for students and even people who can't master a language or maybe have something not quite right with their mouth or their mechanics, or their brain can't really process all the rules of our language. And so this is what we're going to talk about today. So it's very specific, but there's a lot of information. Excuse me. So again, communication happens all the time. And for us, communication happens with more than just language, but right now we're going to talk about language, right? We all know what nonverbal communication is, right? But right now we're really going to talk about language, and communication through oral mastery. I don't talk about sign language really because it's not a sign language class, but we will talk a little bit about that in other chapters. Now, again, our society places a lot of value on communication verbally. I mean, we have our YouTube videos, we have commercials, we have all kinds of stuff, and really being able to talk and master a language and the rules of language and be able to talk well is important. So I hopefully have some really good videos in here that'll help illustrate those things. And again, they can affect people in different ways. They could be more severe, less severe. They could go away. They could stick around for a long time. And sometimes it really affects their self-esteem and how we treat them. And we'll get into it. But again, I really want to give you this introduction here. A lot of treatments, a lot of available options for people with speech and language impairments. I wanted to make sure that our front of our book talked about this actual speech. This is where they got the transcript for this speech, and I think it's good. Let me go back and see if we can actually get it going here. I wonder if I can. Okay, good. I won't show you the whole thing, but just it starts right where she starts. Well, okay, good. Oh yes, yes, of course. Oh, kind of slow down. Hold on. There we go. That's a great way of putting it. I really like that. And by the way, if she considers this her best award, she's an Academy Award winner. She's gotten an Oscar. So if she likes this one better, that tells you that this is very, very important. So just wanted to share that with you and let you know that that's real. That wasn't something that she made up. This is a quick little video. I won't show you all of it, but this is how how people are portrayed in film. And some of them are like real actual disorders and some of them are just being silly. So we'll see. There we go. We'll talk about this later too. Another Academy Award winner. Pitch. Bad accent. That's great. So again, sometimes we'll talk about messages of communication that get out okay, and sometimes somebody can't hear it okay. So if you notice, the guy in the middle, he was talking, it was a specific accent, but everybody around him heard it. So there was no communication problem there. But when you talk to other people who didn't understand it, then the message did not get received. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, and there's some more of that video you can go ahead and watch later, but it's kind of silly. But it just shows you the different things that we see in our society and in movies and things like that. And it's been around for quite some time. Some of those movies and cartoons are from the 50s. So again, we'll first talk about speech and language impairments and their description. There's a lot here. Now, obviously, if there's an impairment, it can negatively affect something. It also can negatively affect their future. So again, sometimes, and we'll talk about how some early speech impediments are okay, right? Some little kids are still learning. It's okay. And some that kind of move past the age of 6 or 7, they may be an early indicator of a learning disability. And that's a whole nother chapter, right? But again, we talk about speech first because it leads into these other things. Now, the book is really good about separating the difference between the different types of disorders, but it can get a little muddy, so I want to start with this. Start with speech is the vocal production of language. That's it. Okay, communication comes in different forms, but speech is the vocal production of language. Excuse me, a speech impairment is when that's impaired in some way. It could be that there's something physically wrong, and we'll talk about all the different systems in the body. It could be that there's something neurologically wrong, right? Or it could be some other things going on. So we'll learn about that here. Again, there's a speech disorder and a language disorder. Now, speech is actually that speech, that vocal production. Sometimes if somebody, like if you had an accident on your face, you can't talk really good, so you might have a temporary speech disorder impairment, right? Some people have things which are called, again, communication disorder is almost like the broader term. Could be communicating in either way, but again, let's talk about speech. But with the speech specifically, that it has to do with the vocal production. So let's not forget that. Stuttering is an example. Now, stuttering is also considered a disfluency. So sometimes we'll talk about fluency or disfluency. And sometimes there's people who stutter, and you heard in that video, they call in England, they call it stammering. So here in America, we call it stuttering. And these are the different parts of the body that actually help language happen. It's not just here. Speech doesn't just happen right here, okay? First thing, I want everybody to feel Your breath. Have you ever tried it? Talk on the inhale. Or not talk with any air coming out. You have to have this resonating system that comes here. Again, excuse me, first the breathing is our respiratory system, our lungs, okay? And again, these different parts make the articulation work better. You know, some people do not articulate their words. But again, we have to have our air, respiratory system, helps us get that air flowing. The vibrating system is here. Put your hand on your throat and say your name, my name. And it can go up, down, or up. That's what pitch is. Okay. So again, we have to have this vibrating system, and every time we have a sore throat, it's rough or scratchy, and if you can't talk, it's the vibration's not happening. Okay. And then there's the resonating system. These are like your speakers. Your speakers don't come from your air. The speakers actually, the resonates through your cavities of you have sinuses up here, and so that's why when your sinuses are stuffed, you sound like this, right? It's not that your nose is stuffed, but your sinuses are stuffed, and so your sound doesn't resonate. That's why you sound different when you're sick. Isn't that funny? Yeah. So you have these three systems, but again, the speech and articulation mechanisms are up in here as well. Again, these are like moving parts, and if they don't work well, or what if your like lips are chapped and you're trying not to talk or your lips, right? You're going to have an articulation problem. Okay, good. But let's talk about language. Now, some people can have everything working. Like I got all this working. I have my air coming through, my vocal cords are vibrating, my resonating systems are working. I have a little bit of a stuffed up nose, and all my speech and articulation is just fine. But what if I don't know the language? Now, you can have language itself as a rule-based communication system, right? But what if I don't know the rules of the language? Yeah, language disorder. So what if I'm the person who mixes up words? I do the right sentence. I say, see the boy run is the correct sentence, but I said, run, boy, see the, right? That right there would just be the wrong order. That would be the wrong rules. And sometimes that's a neurological condition. So we again look at language and language disorders, even if somebody can communicate well. So again, when it comes to language disorders, there's receiving information and expressing information. Some people can receive information just fine, but they don't talk very well. That's when you're going to get a late person who doesn't speak very common, like even Einstein didn't speak till he was 3. And then expressive disorder, some people just have that choppy language, or they can't really get out what they're trying to express. And sometimes that's, you'll see that with ADHD kids, autistic kids, and kids like this with speech and language impairments. Now, communication, again, happens on a two-way street, right? So here I put with the guy, I put 2 blue arrows, okay? So right here, if he is having an expressive issue, right here, maybe he's not making the right sounds, incorrect speech sounds. He might have all the rules, but you can't really understand him still. So like, for example, he could say something that's like really soft, but he's saying something really normal, but he's following all the rules, but you can't really hear him. So again, I'm saying something normal, you just can't hear it. So the sound is incorrect, but the rules are okay. You're not going to understand, right? Maybe you could hear that. But now somebody else might have clear sound, but miscue the rules. So it's going to sound backwards, it's going to sound weird, it's going to sound rushed, mushed, all the kind of, again, the message is unclear. And so that would be considered an expressive disorder, okay? Now if somebody is receiving things poorly, now there are people who have receptive processing delay. Now we'll see that with ADHD and autism, things like that. But the reception, like you could tell somebody perfectly, use the correct rules, it sounds awesome, great, but they just didn't understand it, right? It's not that they speak a different language, they have something that doesn't process what you're saying. Sometimes people just have a delay. Sometimes people have a big disorder. Now, let's say his speech and rules are clear, but she has difficulty understanding it. She's not going to receive that. So again, expressive issues and receptive issues. And so make sure that you know the difference. That's a big deal to know right at this point. Now, types of speech or language impairments. Again, there could be articulation issues. There could be fluency, which makes it I talk like that, or I talk choppy, or I stutter, right? And sometimes there's voice, or sometimes people have a really high-pitched voice. Sometimes you'll see that with people, right? And then language disorders have to do with the form and the content and use. And so let's talk about that. Okay. And again, this is not for all kids. This is when kids are little, they're still learning, right? But if they're past the point of learning, which is usually about first grade, that's usually when the referrals start coming through. First, second grade, yeah. Now, types of speech impairments. Okay, this is the chart from the book. Okay, see how there's articulation, fluency, and voice? So let's talk about this. First, instead of articulation, it talks about misarticulation, which just means not articulating well. Okay, abnormal production of speech sounds. So this is the one that the book gave as an example. Okay, so if she's reading, I wouldn't expect her to be reading so well, but if she's just replacing it, repeating a story, then you could hear the articulation. So she has maybe, when it comes to her R's and W's and things like that, and she's still learning, but she is 3, so that's something to keep an eye on, right? It doesn't mean that's going to stick forever, but when you have a 6-year-old talking, like, still have the O's and L's and things like that, we got to work on that. This is one that I wanted to show people about, apraxia. This has to do with kids that can communicate. They know what to say, but they just can't get it out. It's almost there's parts of the brain that look like kind of like a stroke person who's had a stroke. But this young man, he has some challenges here. Sorry, stuck. He's signing more. So here is a young man. He's probably about 4, and he's doing approximation of words. He can't really get it out, but he is communicating through signs, which is really great. So he can communicate. He just can't speak very well. So it's really interesting how, again, speech and language, especially these speech sounds and speech disorders right here, can look very different, but again, it just depends on the kid and the person. So again, I apologize for the videos going slow. Yeah, he's got a lot of cool stuff going on there. So yeah, you guys can watch the whole videos there. The book really talked about 4 types of articulation errors. So you heard for the girl, she didn't say rabbit, she said wabbit. So she still got something out there, but she substituted one sound for the next, okay? Excuse me. Omission is when something is left out, right? When they say, instead of saying I'm sleepy, she said I sleepy. They left out stuff. They didn't substitute. Distortion is when instead of saying can Susan come over on Friday, it sounds like Shujin. Can Shujin come over on Friday? I have a friend whose kid still instead of with, he says wish, like whis, like it's a different type of th sound. And when you stop and make him do it, he can do it, but he just generally doesn't, and he's 10. So it's the last thing, and she said, I'm picking my battles. I figured he'll figure it out. Again, it happens just like that a lot of times. In addition, it's like instead of saying I miss her, you like a child might say I miss her. So there's four different types of these articulation errors, and again, when they're little, they're still learning. But if it holds on, if you're looking at 5, 6, 7, that's something. So now a disfluency is fluency is something that's smooth, right? A disfluency is chopped up. There's two types, and I'm really glad that the book talks about both types. One is a stuttering. We know we're pretty common. Most of us know what a stutter is. And this one I like because it's from kids, the kids' point of view, and it's adorable. How cute. Yeah, so it's not the end of the world. It's just, for kids, they're just trying to get through it. And you can tell that these kids had so much more about them. They are not their stutter. Again, person first language all the way. I want to give you a little clip here about famous stutterers. You may recognize some of these people, you may not. It's our current vice president. And did you know the voice of Darth Vader used to stutter? Yeah. Bruce Willis used to stutter. It's an old movie too. Nicole Kidman, I actually was not aware of her stutter. She's very successful. Yeah, she also has some breathiness. Marilyn Monroe. She may have been considered autistic as well, so she's interesting. I'm not familiar with Anne Glenn, but she's the wife of Winston Churchill. He was like the leader of Britain for a long time, and so he was kind of a big deal. The guy who created Garfield. And let's see, I think there's another one I think that stopped. Hold on there. Lewis Carroll, who wrote Alice in Wonderland. Very cool. And I think it's kind of slowing down here. Mark Anthony. I did not know that as well. Mike Rowe, if you watch those like dirty job shows, yeah, he had a very pronounced stutter. So again, there's a lot of people who had it, may still have it a little bit, and maybe it comes out when they're excited or nervous or something, but it's not the end of the world. And I think for some people it does stay, and for some people it goes away. But cluttering is where you get words, they're not saying like a word, the words kind of come in like they go super fast and then they get clumped and then so it's clumping, and I really liked how the book included this because I see a lot of this at the college level actually. And yes, I know I speak fast. It sounds like me, I sound like this sometimes, but it's a specific disfluency. No. So you can hear even though he sounds like he's nervous in front of a camera, he sounds like that all the time. So again, it's not just a temporary thing. For some people, he said he's living with it a whole life, and sounds like if you can infer what he's saying is his parents aren't together anymore, and maybe his dad wasn't as supportive. But again, that's very common. You're going to get different types of responses from different types of people. Okay. Then there's voice problems. Okay. It could be super high, super low, super soft, super loud. People do have loudness sometimes, but there's different sections here. Pitch, is that high or low, right? Some people have like really high. You also notice that with people who are preemies, kids who are born early, they have like a little Minnie Mouse voice like for a long time, and like their body's little and everything else is like all but little. It's really cute. So you'll see that sometimes, and you can kind of pick that out of a crowd when somebody has a super high voice and they're like a really smaller person. Sometimes they're a preemie. Phonation, it's that tone. They could have that really breathiness. And I talk, okay, you can understand what I'm saying, but it's super breathy. And sometimes people have a strained phonation or super scratchy. So again, it's phonation like headphones. Think of it that way. It's what you're hearing. Also, let's see. The next one is, my computer's been very, very slow. So thank you for being patient. There we go. Resonance. You might hear like unnasally, like people talk through their nose, and sometimes it's an indication of a palate problem. And so we'll talk about cleft palate and cleft lip later too as well. Oh, I'm sorry. Intensity. I skipped this one here. Intensity. Sometimes it could be super loud or super soft, right? Not pitch, not phonation, not resonance, but intensity. Okay. So that's speech impairments. Again, that has to do with our breathiness, our scratchy throat maybe, our oral, our resonating systems and things like that, even our articulation. This is all those parts that we learned about in the previous section. Now the scheme of language. Now this is people who just can't get it all together, which is fine. Again, we all need help. We all have our impairments. But this is our diagram of the book. See how language talks about two different sections? There's form, and then content, and then use. And I really like how the book separates this out too. So again, if we remember, language is the rules of our language, right? Okay. The form includes phonology, morphology, and syntax, and let's talk about that a little bit here. Phonology is like phonics. I don't know if some of you learn in preschool or early school like phonics. It's those you can't forget it. It's putting two letters together. So phonics, right? It has these combinations of words, like of letters. So th is th, ph is th, right? And gy is not even gear. It's g, right? So putting things together, combining things together, and putting those things together in a sentence, that's phonology, being able to put things together and understand the sounds. Morphology is the difference between saying I I'm going to the store or I went to the store. How certain verbs change, right? Or I ran back to the car, or I'm running back to the car. See how those things morph into different things. So you could have like a base verb and it changes based on the situation or the timing or the person, right? So morphology, some people native English speakers like me, when we go to learn Spanish and we have to do all the verb conjugating, that's where morphology is very difficult for us. Now, syntax is really word endings. It's like the ing or the es. If said, I saw two blue cars today. Sometimes kids will say, I saw two blue car today. So that could be syntax. Also, moving things around. So sometimes I might go places and they don't say, hi, how are you? They say, you have good day. You have good day, right? So sometimes just like this, the order of things, it's putting the verb and the subject, moving it around. And again, it's not so much learning a language, but learning this particular language. And then again, sometimes you're still learning that as you go, but it's only a problem when it's a big problem, right? Syntax is difficult sometimes, even for native speakers. Okay. Then we have use, right? So sometimes people can speak well, they know the rules, but they don't use the language properly. Okay. So let me go back. So use in itself, we talk more about pragmatics. This is one of my favorite terms here. Pragmatics is always doing the right thing. Okay, so using your language in the right area, like you don't walk into the bank and be like, yo, give me some money, right? Those are words, right? You might be able to say that to a friend, but if you say that to a bank, what's going to happen? They're number one, they might think that you're threatening. I don't know, right? So it's about, so if you have the right language and it sounds correct, but you just don't use it in the right place, you're just going to get into trouble. Now, pragmatics is a big deal too when it comes to social skills, right? Holding a conversation, greeting somebody, and that's why I really wanted to put this one in here. It's not in the book, but I really think pragmatics is important. Obviously, that's something I live with in my house. My son has had pragmatic goals since kindergarten, and he's still working on them. So again, you're going to get kids who are on the spectrum or kids who just have different social skills, and then we can be working on their pragmatics. So I try to cut these beginning parts out, but okay, good. I like to put different videos in with different accents and different cultural pieces in there because, again, I like how she's illustrating something, but I like how it's, for some of us who don't are not very used to that type of accent, it makes us like listen up a little bit better. So her message is good. It's just a little bit different, right? Wellington boots means, right, a waterproof coat means a rain jacket, and Wellington boots means like your waterproof boots. Okay. So let's see, I kind of skipped ahead. So use, okay, good. Now content is what's in the sentence, what's in the communication. Sometimes the content is off, right? So you'll say, hey, what did you have for, can you remember what you had for lunch? And they'll be like, food. Okay. If that's a consistent issue, then that's an issue. If it's just, what did you have for lunch? And then you can't remember, that's different. But again, the content might be different, the meaning, right? And I think our book talks about, oh, it's a big fish. Not wrong, but it's a shark. So let's be more specific. Let's see. Now, semantics is kind of the specific rules. I had somebody arguing, I kind of had to settle a bet the other day because somebody said, what's the difference between a cliff and a bluff? Okay, and again, those might be English words, but I said a cliff is more straight up and down, like you could fall off a cliff, but a bluff may be more like still steep and you could still fall, but it's still more diagonal. So that would be a semantic challenge, right? And some people just don't understand the specific parts of language and they can't communicate specifically that way. Okay, so let's look at this. It's kind of, Sorry. I'm telling you, I've had a lot of tech challenges, so thank you for sticking with me on this. So think of those, instead of computers, two people. Same thing, right? So you could have semantic language in computers, but you also have, we're talking about semantic language with people, but that's the same thing. Because if two computers don't talk to each other, how can they, right? If two people can't come to a middle ground and kind of agree, like maybe somebody's trying to describe a car, but they didn't know what type of car it was, and then they were just like, it's the one, and it's like black, and it has like four wheels, the one with doors. It's not very clear, right? And then the other person's trying to get clarification. Okay, well, is it electric? Is it hybrid? Is it SUV? Is it a sedan? Right? So trying to get the clarification to that really both understand the same issue. So semantics really gets down into shared meanings, and I think it's great. And I think I'm glad that the book talked about that as well. So again, speech impairments and language issues. So make sure you know all of those. And now the characteristics of speech disorders, they don't specifically cause academic difficulties, because you could have a stutter and still be able to read and do math and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes, there's that self-esteem in there, and then the self-esteem can actually affect educational goals. And then again, there's more about pragmatics in here too, and I think that's really good to know, because a lot of people don't have that back and forth language ability. So hold on, we are going a little bit slow. There we go. Oops. And then we skip, of course. Now, students with pragmatic difficulties, sometimes they can initiate a conversation, but they can't hold it. Have you ever had that? Somebody comes up to you and says, "Hi, how was your day?" And they go, "It was okay." And they go, "Oh, did you hear about the Mars landing?" Like, it's just kind of out of nowhere. That would be maintaining a conversation, sticking on topic. So when somebody asks you about your day, the pragmatic language rules is that you would ask them about their day, right? Body language, facial expressions, recognizing who's actually listening, things like that. So there's a lot of different things that pragmatics can affect. Again, social customs are off. Like, you don't say, "Yo, what's up, grandma?" You know, right? Maybe you would, right? But maybe you're just using slang language. But if somebody can't understand the difference between how to speak to a teacher and how to speak to a peer, that's a pragmatic issue, okay? Appropriate responses, would you say, like, "Oh, can I sharpen my pencil?" "Yeah, hold on one sec. Let me sharpen my pencil first." "No way. I don't understand. Why are you making me wait?" Pragmatics has a lot to do with just the social rules of waiting and things like that. So, and peer relationships can be affected as well. The book has some of these challenges here with speech disorders. Again, misarticulation, disfluency, like the stutter or clumping, and then the poor voice quality resonance. Again, the challenges are on the outside. Getting the speech out, reluctance to speak, withdrawn behavior, and frustration. But we'll talk about solutions too. Some of the challenges with the language disorder is some listening tasks or vocabulary, or remembering a word, or comprehending a word, or discussing it. That's even writing, okay, some of the challenges with language. If you don't speak in a correct way, how would you know how to write that down, right? So you'll see some extra challenges here. Make sure you know expressive language, right? Receptive language, okay? And I wanted to give you a little clip here. It's very sweet. How cute she is. So you guys can finish up that video, but it's very sweet that that is a really dedicated mom and really just, I like that she said I'm looking for answers. Some parents aren't really looking for answers. They're just looking for compliance or they're looking for like the perfect child. But I will talk more about some early intervention again. Again, that pragmatics is using the appropriate language in the right social context. And communication competence is, are you good? Are you good at communicating? Are you a good communicator? I'd like to think that I am. Sometimes I speak too fast or I stutter, like just like that. I stammer over my own words. But hey, I think we all try to do our best. But when it is a consistent impairment, then it's an impairment, right? It has to affect all areas of life, or have like an effect on the self-esteem and things like that for it to be an actual real issue. Okay. Now, challenges and their solutions, and I really like how the book kind of keeps going with solutions. Now, again, we'll talk about speech therapy here and different types of instructional techniques. Now, speech therapy is a related device, I would say more like a service. And again, there's lots of different things that you can do with speech therapy. Speech language pathologist would be like a master's level person and has a certificate, a lot of schooling and learning certificate. But our college has a certificate for SLPA, and I'll talk about that in a sec. But it's a fantastic business to get into. I'm a big fan of it. Our program is very, very good. So, and again, I think the starting salary is like 55 and up. I mean, it's a good business to have just with a certificate, and you don't have to have a bachelor's or a master's, which is great. Okay. Now, the solutions here to remember the speech disorder, the challenges, the solutions here is teacher sensitivity, speech therapy, and peer acceptance. And so, again, it's hard. You can't force somebody to accept you, but you can really work on teacher sensitivity and speech therapy and things like that, and then put them in a good environment. Okay. Some of the solutions here to the language disorders are language sensitive instruction, learning strategies, language therapy, explicit instruction, graphic organizers, and we'll talk about all that. Again, language therapy is very much like speech therapy, but you work on more on the rules, right? And so again, it's because it's language. And again, some of the tips here are maintain eye contact with somebody who might be struggling. Don't look away, don't roll your eyes. If somebody's stuttering or stammering or working over certain words, just be with them. Just be present. Wait for them to finish. Don't finish the sentence for them. That's not right. Okay? If you speak for a person, you're taking their dignity away, and that's not good. Provide that respectful environment. What I usually do is I kind of get closer to them and kind of get down, not down to their level, but even if, I mean, I'm not that tall, but if I'm looking down at somebody and they're having a hard time communicating, I've noticed that I kind of like settle my back down. I like kind of lower my posture and just get closer, like I'm literally providing them a space. And so see if you can do that as well. Explicit instruction is a technique that a teacher can do. Explicit means like instead of saying, "Oh, go clean out your desk," well, kids might not know what that means, right? And especially my kids are going to shut something there. But if you say, "Hey, to clean out your desk, sometimes you should take your books out and put them in a pile and take all the papers out and put those in a pile and then maybe sweep in the back," right? So explicit instruction, giving very, right? So have you ever noticed that to a kid? Go tie your shoes. They're 5. They're like, they have no idea. Would you just expect them to tie their shoes? No, you teach them how to tie their shoes. And how many times do you teach them? About a million, right? So explicit instruction really helps. And I think a lot of times people assume other people know things. Just assume that they don't and ask them, can I help you with that? And that's nice. Graphic organizers are just a way, it's like a handouts, right? If I've ever given you a handout in class or you've gotten a handout from a teacher that has like areas to put information in, a graphic organizer, and we'll talk more about that in our book. And content enhancement strategies. So there's ways, and we'll talk a little bit more, there's ways to actually remember things differently. The journal assignment this time is talking about your learning style, and we'll go over that in a sec, but taking the same content and enhancing it in different ways can make people understand it differently. So for me, sometimes I give different examples. I try to make it culturally sensitive or culturally applicable. And so that's a big deal here. Speech and language impairments described. Okay, so this right here is about halfway through. So I'm going to click off now, and part 2 goes into context, special education service, future perspectives, and then the review and resources. So